The sound of chains rattling woke me up, not the kind you hear in a horror movie, but the kind that means someone's hooking up your truck to a tow hitch. At 6:12 in the morning, I ran out in mismatched socks, still brushing my teeth, only to find my pickup, my livelihood as a mechanic, my weekend escape vehicle, and yes, my pride and joy, being yanked off the street like it was a stolen shopping cart. And there she stood, Karen. Hair perfectly teased, robe belted like a general's uniform, holding a clipboard as if it were the law itself. She didn't flinch when I asked what the hell was going on. Instead, she sipped her coffee and said, "Read your HOA bylaws. No street parking, even temporarily. You should thank me for upholding standards." Little did she know, just 5 days later, a century-old oak would fall straight through her living room ceiling, and not a single soul on this block would lift a finger to help. Because when you burn every bridge in the neighborhood, don't expect a life raft when the tree comes crashing down. When I moved into Sycamore Ridge, all I wanted was peace. After 10 years of grease-stained boots, double shifts at the garage, and a messy breakup, I had enough for a decent down payment on a fixer-upper at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac. It was a dream, until I met the HOA president. Karen introduced herself with a brochure, a glare, and a passive-aggressive smile that could curdle milk. She told me her full name, but insisted I call her President Dunning, who introduces themselves like a Supreme Court judge. The moment she saw my pickup, a rusted but dependable '99 Ford F-150, her lips pursed like she'd swallowed a lemon. "We encourage tasteful vehicles in the driveway," she said. "For community aesthetic integrity." I wasn't even unpacked yet, but I already had a target on my back. The thing was, I wasn't trying to start anything. The garage door opener was busted, and the moving company had scratched up the mechanism during delivery. So yeah, I parked the truck on the curb for one night. The next morning, it was gone, towed with ruthless efficiency. I thought it was stolen until a smug note arrived in my mailbox. Vehicle removed for noncompliance. Fine, $250. See Bylaw 7.4b. No phone call. No knock on the door. Just bureaucratic vengeance in Arial font. I knocked on Karen's door that afternoon, trying to be civil. She answered with a smirk, holding a clipboard like it was a weapon. I asked why she didn't at least let me know before towing it. Her reply? If I made exceptions, it wouldn't be fair to the rest of the neighborhood. She glanced over my shoulder at the modest workbench I'd started assembling in the garage. Also, the HOA prohibits commercial activity. You're not planning to do any mechanical work here, are you? That was the moment I knew. This woman wasn't just a stickler. She was a tyrant in yoga pants. The neighbors were surprisingly quiet, like they were used to it. I met a few while replacing the busted garage motor. Most smiled politely but didn't say much, until I met Rosa. She was in her 70s, sharp as a tack, with a cane that doubled as a pointer when she ranted. She'd lived in the neighborhood since before the HOA was even a thing. Karen married into the HOA, she told me, shaking her head. Then divorced him and kept the board seat. That woman's drunk on power and decaf. Rosa warned me about the oak tree, an enormous monster looming just beside Karen's property. It's dying. We've asked her to remove it for years. She says it gives her shade and character. One good storm, and someone's gonna lose their roof. At first, I thought Rosa was just being dramatic. But then I noticed it. Branches creaking with every gust of wind, bark peeling like sunburnt skin, roots cracked and raised through Karen's walkway. The city had posted an orange warning sign near the base 2 years ago. Karen removed it and replaced it with a bird bath. No joke. The week went on, and Karen's HOA madness escalated. She emailed me 3 times in 2 days. Once about the color of my porch light, once about leaving a wrench visible in the garage, and once to gently remind me that flags needed to be registered with the board. What kind of tyrant registers flags? She even fined a teenager across the street for parking his skateboard, too visibly, on his porch. It was like living in a gated dystopia with flower beds, but something about her made it feel personal. Maybe it was because I didn't immediately roll over. Maybe she saw my truck and decided I didn't fit the vibe she curated with her pastel wreaths and HOA-issued mailboxes. She wanted compliance, not community. And the neighborhood? Well, they had been under her thumb so long, most had given up fighting back. That is, until the tree, her precious, defiant tree, finally had enough. The sky grew dark on Thursday. The air smelled like ozone and mulch. A summer storm was rolling in, fast and loud. I watched from my garage, still adjusting the automatic lift I'd finally installed. Across the street, Karen paced with her phone, likely filing another complaint about someone's recycling bin being off-center. Thunder cracked and the oak shuddered. One massive limb had already split and hung like a warning finger from the heavens. I'd seen enough in construction and landscaping to know that thing was a ticking time bomb. And Karen? She refused to let the city near it. Said it was a neighborhood feature. That night would change everything. But even then, with the wind howling and nature ready to strike, Karen was more concerned with my porch light being too blue than the death trap swaying above her head. Sometimes karma needs a little push. Other times, it just waits for a good gust of wind. After the towing fiasco, I figured Karen might lay low for a bit. You know, take a victory lap in private and let her clipboard cool off. But I had severely underestimated her thirst for power. If anything, getting my truck towed had emboldened her. It was as if she'd been crowned the queen of Sycamore Ridge, and now she was ready to extend her reign over every flower pot and garden hose in sight. Within days, the entire neighborhood felt like it was under occupation. The once peaceful cul-de-sac had transformed into a miniature dictatorship, complete with fines for bird feeders and mandatory approvals for lawn gnome placement. You think I'm kidding? She made a kid cry because his inflatable dinosaur pool wasn't neighborhood appropriate. I wasn't the only one noticing the madness. There was a growing tension in the air, like a balloon getting inflated too far, one breath away from bursting. It started small. One neighbor, a quiet guy named Greg who worked night shifts, got fined for not trimming the edge of his grass where it met the sidewalk. Then the Johnsons, sweet retirees who handed out cookies during the holidays, were written up for having wind chimes. Wind chimes. According to Karen, they created non-harmonious auditory clutter. The woman basically declared war on pleasant breezes. It wasn't until she ticketed a group of kids for chalk drawings on the sidewalk that I knew something had to be done. They were just little hearts and rockets and smiley faces, but Karen labeled it vandalism and mailed a formal complaint to the parents. One of the moms, Lindsay, came to my garage afterward in tears. I just want to live somewhere my kids can play, she said. But she watches everything we do. It's like she's punishing joy. That was when I knew Karen had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. That night, I met up with Rosa again. She invited me over for lemonade and a quiet vent session, and that's when she dropped a bombshell. Did you know she's not even supposed to be president anymore? She asked, stirring sugar into her glass with that sly glint in her eye. Her term expired last spring, but she amended the bylaws, without a vote, to extend her leadership indefinitely. I nearly spit out my drink. Rosa had the original HOA documents saved in a plastic binder older than my truck. And right there, in ink faded by time, it said the president's term was only 2 years. Karen had ruled for 6. I needed backup, so I enlisted Max, a teenage neighbor who had 2 things going for him: tech skills and zero fear of authority. Max was a junior in high school with a hacker's mindset and a portable speaker that constantly blasted dubstep. The kid once rigged his toaster to send him texts when his Pop-Tarts were ready. When I told him we were going up against Karen, his eyes lit up like it was Christmas morning. Finally, he said, let's end this suburban fascism. We started digging. Max used a little-known loophole in the HOA's online portal. Karen had never updated the security settings and accessed the community violation logs. What we found was a masterpiece of petty tyranny. Over 400 complaints filed by Karen in 1 month alone. She had reported a neighbor's Halloween skeleton for menacing posture. She'd fined a couple for placing pumpkins too early in the season. She even cited someone for using a water hose that wasn't aesthetically cohesive with surrounding foliage. And the best part? She was guilty of at least a third of the same things herself. I printed out copies of every hypocritical infraction, including time-stamped photos of her own violations. Max even caught her on camera wheeling her trash can out the night before collection, an offense she'd fined 2 other families for just last week. The evidence was airtight. Now we just needed the right moment to use it. That moment came at the monthly HOA meeting. Karen always ran it like a royal court, sitting at the front with her gavel and calling people out for decorum breaches if they spoke without permission. But this time I came prepared. Rosa showed up, too, walking slow but steady with that cane in her hand like a sheriff entering a saloon. Karen barely acknowledged us. She opened the meeting with a rant about increasing fines for lawn maintenance violations and passed around a new list of approved mailbox colors. That's when I stood up. I started by thanking her for her hard work, because hey, nothing disarms a tyrant like false gratitude. Then I passed out the stack of violation records, all marked with dates and photos. I explained how Max had compiled the list legally, using publicly available HOA files. Karen's face went pale. Her smile faltered. People around the room began murmuring. I walked through a few highlights, like her Halloween skeleton complaint, complete with a photo of her own inflatable witch from the same night. When I got to the trash bin offense, a few neighbors actually laughed out loud. Karen tried to shout me down, claiming the data was manipulated, but Max pulled out a projector and displayed the source logs in real time. Then Rosa stood up and delivered the finishing blow. According to Article 6, Section 2, the term of HOA president is limited to 2 years. Karen Dunning has exceeded this term by 4 years. I should know. I helped write the original charter. The room went quiet. Rosa opened her binder and handed a copy of the original bylaws to Karen, who stared at it like it had personally betrayed her. There was no official vote that night. Karen wouldn't allow it, but the damage was done. Her control was slipping. People began whispering again, this time with purpose. A few even approached me afterward, shaking my hand. Lindsay hugged Rosa. Max got high fives from the kids he'd defended. It was the beginning of something bigger. Karen wasn't finished, though. Not by a long shot. She doubled down in the days that followed. More emails. More fines. She tried banning all lawn ornaments unless board approved, and issued noise violations to people grilling past 7 p.m. It was like watching someone trying to patch a sinking ship with duct tape. But now, she wasn't just feared, she was mocked. Neighbors started calling her Captain Clipboard behind her back. Someone put googly eyes on her mailbox. The spell was breaking, and that's when the storm rolled in. The one Rosa had warned me about. The one Karen pretended didn't exist. As clouds darkened and winds picked up, the cursed oak tree began to sway. We all knew what was coming, and not a single person made a move to warn her. Not even when the first massive branch snapped and thundered to the ground. Because sometimes poetic justice doesn't need a speech. It just needs a storm and a tree that's had enough. The storm that had been quietly brewing for days finally made its entrance with a theatrical flourish. The sky went from overcast to ominous in a matter of minutes, like someone dimmed the lights on the whole neighborhood. Winds whipped through Sycamore Ridge, sending lawn chairs skittering across driveways and flipping over neatly arranged porch cushions. Thunder cracked so loud it rattled garage doors. And right in the middle of it all stood Karen, clinging to her authority like it was a raincoat that would keep the storm from soaking her. She wasn't just unprepared, she was in denial. While the rest of us battened down hatches and pulled in trash bins, Karen was sending out a final HOA-wide email demanding that unsightly storm shutters be removed to maintain curb appeal during inclement weather. She even capped it off with a line about how true community standards shine brightest during adversity. I stood in my garage doorway, sipping coffee and watching the cursed oak sway like a drunk giant. The tree was a monster, bigger than any other in the neighborhood, its roots cracked through concrete, its limbs thick as telephone poles. It should have been cut down years ago, but Karen blocked every request. It provided shade to her patio and, in her words, majestic character to the block. She even argued it was part of the neighborhood's natural historical identity. Whatever that meant. Earlier that day, Rosa had warned her one last time. Walked right up to her trailer office setup and said, "That tree's gonna kill someone, Karen." But Karen just waved her off with a smirk, muttering something about how Rosa should be more worried about the color of her garden hose. I don't think Karen ever truly believed anything could touch her. She had ruled for so long unchecked that she thought power was protection. But even HOA rules don't stand a chance against nature. By late evening, the storm was full force. Lightning forked across the sky, illuminating the tree like it was on a stage. I could see Karen pacing her front room through the window, still on her laptop, probably writing up citations for someone's improperly parked recycling bin. A few other neighbors had gathered on their porches under the pretense of checking for leaks, but we all knew what we were really watching. Rosa stood on her stoop with her arms crossed, her cane tapping against the railing. Max had set up a small GoPro pointed discreetly toward Karen's house. No one said anything. We just waited. Then it happened. A sound like the earth splitting in half cracked through the wind, a deafening, bone-shaking roar that made everyone freeze. The oak gave a final groan, its trunk bending at an impossible angle, and then with terrifying inevitability, it came crashing down. Not slowly. Not gracefully. It collapsed in one thunderous sweep, straight through Karen's roof like it had been waiting for this moment all its life. Shingles exploded into the air. Wood splintered. Her entire second floor vanished in an instant beneath the massive weight of the tree's main branch. The lights in her house flickered and died. For a few seconds there was total silence. Even the wind seemed to pause in respect. Then came the scream. High-pitched, raw, and unmistakably Karen. It echoed through the street, bouncing off garage doors and picket fences. She stumbled out of her front door, soaked and barefoot, waving her arms and shouting for help. "Someone call 911. I'm trapped. My house is gone." She stood in the rain, mascara streaming down her face, yelling like the storm would listen. But no one moved. Not right away. A few people peeked out from their porches, some even gasped. But after everything she'd done, the tickets, the fines, the harassment, there wasn't much urgency in anyone's step. She had made herself the enemy of the block. And now, in her most vulnerable moment, she was reaping the full price of that isolation. Eventually, someone did call emergency services. Not Karen. Her phone had been buried beneath the tree along with half her living room. It was Max's mom who made the call, after a long sigh and a muttered "bless her heart." The fire department showed up within 10 minutes, sirens howling, headlights cutting through the rain. They assessed the damage and helped get Karen under a tarp, wrapped in one of those foil blankets, still barking about how this was someone else's fault. I overheard her yelling at the fire captain, claiming that the city was supposed to take care of this tree. Rosa just shook her head and walked back inside. But the real twist came when the insurance adjuster arrived the next morning. Karen was out on her lawn in her bathrobe, clutching a binder full of laminated papers and trying to show them proof of her home value. The adjuster barely glanced at them. He had one of those dry, bureaucratic voices that could kill a party in 5 seconds. "Unfortunately, Ms. Dunning, this damage falls under preventable negligence. We have records here of multiple city notices regarding this tree as a hazard. Since you took it upon yourself to remove the city's warning signage and blocked the removal permits, your claim is denied." Karen stared at him like he'd just spoken in an alien language. "Denied," she croaked. "You can't deny me. This is my home." But the adjuster just turned, got in his car, and drove off. Word spread fast. By noon, the entire neighborhood knew Karen wasn't getting a cent. And with the tree removal cost, structural repairs, and her already maxed-out control freak tendencies, she was spiraling. She set up a trailer in her front yard, a beige, dented little thing that looked like a traveling sales office, and declared it her temporary residence and operations center. She sent out another HOA-wide message saying she would continue her duties, uninterrupted. No one responded. The trailer became a symbol overnight. Kids whispered stories about it being haunted. Someone stuck a sign on the side that read Queen Karen's Castle. Max replaced it the next day with Error 404, Authority Not Found. Lawn chairs started appearing on driveways facing her trailer, like we were all attending some slow-moving performance. And in a way we were. Karen had built herself up so high that her fall was practically mythological. But the truth was, it wasn't the storm or the tree that brought her down. It was everything she'd done before it. All the rules she enforced but didn't follow, the people she punished instead of supported, the neighbors she turned into enemies. In the end, when it mattered most, she had no one. Not a friend. Not a supporter. Just a fallen tree, a crumpled house, and a trailer full of laminated bylaws no one cared about anymore. And as I looked out from my porch, sipping my coffee once again, I couldn't help but feel a little poetic. Some people say karma takes too long. I say it just waits for the right weather. By the time the last broken limb of the fallen oak was hauled off Karen's crushed roof, the neighborhood had moved on. Not in the passive, forgetful way, but in a deliberate, unified silence. No one dropped by with casseroles. No one offered ladders, tools, or sympathy. Karen, once the self-declared queen of Sycamore Ridge, now lived in a clunky beige trailer on her own front lawn, a monument to her downfall. She still tried to act like she ran things, like the HOA board still trembled at her email sign-offs, and that clipboards held the same power they used to. But it was all over, and the only one who didn't seem to realize that was Karen herself. The trailer quickly became a source of comedy for the neighborhood. It was meant to be a temporary solution until the insurance check came in, except the check never did. Every time she called the company, she got the same answer. She had voided her own policy by refusing to comply with repeated hazard warnings. At first, she tried filing appeals, blaming the city, the neighbors, even the tree itself, as if it had fallen maliciously. But policies don't care about hurt feelings or righteous indignation, and soon, she was stuck in that trailer indefinitely. Even then, she didn't stop. She began issuing emails again, this time from the Mobile HOA Operations Center, and started using clipart-filled PDF attachments with new rule proposals. One of them banned audible outdoor laughter past 8 p.m. Another suggested a fine for lawn flamingos. No one responded. The HOA group chat, once managed with iron-fisted moderation, turned into a stream of GIFs, memes, and sarcastic one-liners. Karen tried to threaten legal action, but Rosa, wise as ever, calmly informed her at the next meeting, now held in Lindsay's garage with folding chairs and potluck snacks, that Karen had no remaining legal authority. Still, Karen persisted. She filed another round of citations for things like unapproved porch wreaths and unkempt mailbox spaces. Most people ignored her, but I saw how some neighbors, especially the newer ones, were still unsure. They weren't certain if Karen still held some kind of secret power, like a villain waiting to activate a hidden clause in the fine print. I decided it was time for a little public clarity. It started with my truck. I'd gotten it back weeks ago from the impound, paid the ridiculous fees, and even gave it a tune-up to celebrate its return. But I wasn't just going to drive it. No. I had something else in mind. Using a friend's shop, I painted a mural across the side of the truck. It showed a cartoonish oak tree falling directly onto a house that bore a striking resemblance to Karen's. The tree had a smug face. The house looked horrified. It was colorful, ridiculous, and impossible to miss. I parked it directly across from her trailer and left it there all day. She saw it immediately, stormed out of her trailer, slippers flapping, and started snapping pictures while yelling about harassment and property defacement. I just leaned on my fender and said, "Free expression, Karen. It's in the bylaws, Article 4, Section 2. You remember, right?" That shut her up for the moment, but the glare she gave me could have melted paint. The next morning, I found a noise violation slip-taped to my garage door. Apparently, my tools made disruptive mechanical sounds during prohibited hours. Never mind that those hours didn't exist in the bylaws. But I'd been ready for this. I'd filed paperwork with the city weeks ago to rezone my garage as a home-based business. Legit, documented, and registered. My auto repair shop, Jake's Honest Wrenches, was officially open for business, and Karen had zero say in it. When she tried to argue that commercial enterprises were banned in residential areas, I showed her the zoning update from City Hall. Her mouth opened, closed, and opened again before she retreated back into her trailer like a defeated turtle. But I wasn't done yet. That week, I offered every neighbor a free basic tune-up or oil change, right in my driveway. People lined up. Rosa brought cookies. Max brought his Bluetooth speaker and made it a block party. Karen peeked from behind her blinds as families laughed, swapped stories, and popped open lawn chairs. Still clinging to power, she made one last push. She called for an emergency HOA meeting. Just her, sitting under a plastic canopy with a fold-out table and a nameplate that said, President Emeritus. No one came. Not even the birds. That's when Rosa stepped in. With her usual calm dignity, she gathered the neighborhood and called for a proper vote to remove Karen's presidency permanently and hold new elections. It wasn't just symbolic. She had the paperwork, she had the signatures, and she had the support. We all gathered in Max's garage this time, and everyone who had been silenced or steamrolled over the years showed up. Rosa opened the meeting with a simple question. Do we want someone who serves the community, or someone who serves themselves? The vote was anonymous, but the result was loud and clear. Karen was out. Unanimously. Even Karen tried to cast a vote. Twice. But Max had rigged the system with a tiny scanner that caught her red-handed. Nice try, he said with a smirk, but voter fraud isn't very HOA chic. As if karma wanted to put the cherry on top, Karen's ex-husband showed up the next day. Apparently, they'd signed off on a reality show pilot years ago, back when she thought her HOA presidency would make her famous. The show, aptly titled Neighborhood Justice, had been picked up for streaming. The crew wanted to shoot some updated footage. Karen had no choice, her release form was still valid. Within a week, cameras were rolling, catching her trailer tantrums, her feeble attempts to enforce non-existent rules, and her bewilderment at the community's complete indifference to her authority. The final blow came when someone, a mystery hero, attached a massive inflatable crown to the top of her trailer. It read, Retired Royalty. Karen tore it down in a fury, nearly tripping over a lawn gnome in the process. The footage of that scene alone made it into the show's teaser trailer. At this point, she had nothing left to wield. No power. No office. No house. Just a trailer, a stack of printed bylaws that no one cared about, and a starring role in a show that made her the butt of every suburban joke. Her final attempts at regaining control, letters to City Hall, calls to lawyers, even one misguided call to the police over civil disobedience, all went nowhere. She was done, not because we punished her, but because we simply stopped listening. The neighborhood, once fractured and stiff with fear, had come alive again. Sidewalk chalk returned. Porch plants bloomed without restriction. Families chatted across driveways while their kids raced scooters down the street. The HOA meetings became community potlucks. Laughter returned, loud and unafraid. And as I looked across the cul-de-sac at the woman who had once towed my truck, I couldn't help but smile. Poetic justice didn't need sirens or fireworks. Sometimes all it needed was a tree, a truck, and a neighborhood that finally said, no more. The first time Karen tried to reclaim her old power, she did it the only way she knew how, dramatically and with absolutely no self-awareness. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon, and the entire neighborhood had gathered for the first official community barbecue under the new HOA leadership. Rosa was seated like a queen herself, flanked by Max and Lindsay, as families passed around homemade potato salad and grilled corn. My garage-turned-workshop had a string of lights overhead, the smell of burgers filled the air, and laughter came easy for the first time in a long while. Kids ran around with water balloons, teenagers DJ'd from a Bluetooth speaker, and even the most reserved neighbors seemed at ease. That's when she arrived, Karen, dressed in a bright red pantsuit like she was about to host a press conference, holding a megaphone in one hand and a stack of freshly printed flyers in the other. She marched straight down the center of the street like it was a runway, eyes scanning every face for weakness. No one moved. A few people stopped chewing. Someone muted the music. It was the most awkward silence we'd had in weeks. Karen raised her megaphone and declared, "This gathering is in violation of Section 3.2c of the HOA Social Event Policy, and you are all in breach of community conduct standards." She started tossing her flyers into the air like they were subpoenas, and a few landed in the fruit salad. The silence that followed was broken not by anger, not by fear, but by laughter. It started with Greg, the night shift guy who hadn't cracked a smile in months. Then Rosa chuckled, covering her mouth with a napkin. Soon, the whole block was laughing, not cruelly, not mockingly, just freely. Karen stood frozen, caught between disbelief and outrage, as if the very laws of reality had betrayed her. She tried again, shouting about noise ordinances and unapproved signage, but someone turned the music back up, and the conversation swallowed her voice like it had never been there. That was her last attempt at a power play. After that, the trailer stayed quiet. Occasionally, we'd spot her peeking out from behind the curtains, binoculars still in hand, old habits refusing to die. But the community had shifted for good. Rosa became our honorary HOA grandma, handing out advice and reminding folks of the old days when neighborhoods looked after each other instead of patrolling each other. Max was now in charge of digital communications, meaning our emails were gift-filled and hilarious, and Lindsay had taken over event planning. As for me, I kept doing what I did best. Fixing engines, helping neighbors, and keeping the pickup parked exactly where Karen used to hate it. Over the weeks, something changed in the air around Sycamore Ridge. It was more than just freedom, it was connection. People borrowed tools again. Kids played tag on the sidewalks without fear of being fined for unauthorized running. Porch lights came in every shade, from warm amber to neon purple, and no one batted an eye. We even held a themed movie night in someone's driveway, complete with a projector and popcorn machine. Karen watched from her trailer window, the flicker of Back to the Future reflecting in her glasses as she sat alone in the dark. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But every time I remembered that early morning when she had my truck towed without a second thought, when she smiled as if ruining someone's day was a civic duty, that sympathy dissolved like chalk in the rain. Actions have consequences, and hers had finally caught up to her. Then came the one-year anniversary. It wasn't planned as such, but Rosa, being the sharp mind she is, remembered the exact date. "It's been a full circle," she said over coffee. "Exactly 1 year since she had your truck hauled off like it was garbage. Feels like it's worth celebrating, doesn't it?" I agreed. Not out of spite, but because it felt right, like honoring a turning point the day the neighborhood woke up. We decided to throw a little surprise party. I parked my pickup across from her trailer again, just like old times, but this time it was decorated with balloons, a Happy Towiversary banner, and a life-sized cardboard cutout of a tow truck driver giving a thumbs up. Rosa brought cupcakes shaped like tiny trucks. Max programmed his speaker to play a loop of celebratory honk. Even the mailman joined in, wearing a party hat as he made his rounds. Karen emerged around noon, squinting at the sunlight, confused by the music and decorations. The banner was the first thing she saw, and the moment she read it, her face cycled through every shade of disbelief, rage, and humiliation. She stormed out toward my truck, fists clenched, ready for a fight. But I met her halfway with a paper plate and a cupcake. "You want one with chocolate frosting or vanilla?" I asked casually. She didn't take it. Just stared at the truck, at the cutout, at the neighbors watching from their driveways with calm amusement. For once, she didn't say anything. No shouting. No clipboards. Just silence. Then she turned around and walked back into her trailer, slowly, like the wind had finally been knocked out of her sails. That night, as the block lights twinkled and the last of the cupcakes disappeared, I stood by my truck and looked out over the neighborhood. It wasn't perfect. The sidewalks still had cracks, the lawns weren't all regulation height, and someone had left a pink flamingo next to their mailbox just to spite the old rules. But it was alive. It was real. And it belonged to the people again, not to some delusional authority figure with a laminated binder. The best part? The change stuck. Karen never tried to regain power after that. Her trailer stayed where it was, a monument to what happens when you treat neighbors like subjects instead of equals. Eventually, the network aired the pilot episode of Neighborhood Justice. And yep, she was in it. In all her clipboard-wielding, tantrum-throwing glory. It didn't take long for the internet to pick it up. Trailer Karen trended for a weekend, complete with memes, remix videos, and one truly excellent auto-tune version of her HOA rant. But as for us, we were done with drama. The community had found something better. Shared meals, loud laughs, and the quiet peace of knowing that no one was going to get fined for existing. Karen had the chance to be a leader, to build something good, and she threw it away for control. What she got instead was a front-row seat to the life she could have had. As I shut the garage that night, I glanced one last time at my truck, still right where I liked it, exactly where she once had it taken. It stood there proudly, balloons still swaying in the breeze, a small but mighty monument to one simple truth. Sometimes all it takes to bring down a tyrant is a community that finally says, enough.